everybody. I am your host, Tinkus Jones, and welcome to the Foreword. Alright, we got some breaking news. The New World Order is trying to depopulate the world by mass inoculation. These satanic pedophiles through the UN, the CFFR, the Bilderbergs, the Trilateral Commission, WHO, the George Soros funded World Economic Forum says a deep state, anti-human, false flag operation designed to kill everyone. It's mass sterilization by the globalists to turn the goddamn frog gay. And I don't like it. To bring about a global governance under the Great Reset, also known as the New World Order. You know what I think of you? New World Order? Go to hell, you satanic pedophiles! Hello folks, my name is Tinkus, and we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories. This is going to be fun. So what kind of catapulted this video, inspired me, was looking at all these articles of science deniers and why do people believe in COVID conspiracy theories. They're always by some psychiatrist. It's always all these buzzwords, anti-science, science denier, science illiterate, etc. Now, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by this, but most Americans are not scientists. The only science that we have presented to us is through the mainstream media. And if people distrust the mainstream media, do you really blame them? It's become so politicized, and science has even become politicized. It's kind of sick, folks. I don't blame people for not believing exactly what they hear all the time on the news. And as far as the anti-mask thing, I think that one makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've been seeing this going on for decades in China, and nobody wants that, folks. And I'm not going to get in the rabbit hole of the anti-vax movement, but this has been going on for decades and decades. Basically, since the first vaccine was created, I'm pretty sure that's when the first vaccine conspiracy theory started. So it's not new at all. And the fact that these people don't even acknowledge or even look at how conspiracy theory started and maybe how it connects to this, kind of mind-blowing. There was actually an article that said people are too stupid to read graphs. Now, I'm pretty sure I could pick up the stupidest man in America and say, what's this graph mean? And he would be able to interpret that perfectly. That's the whole point of graphs. Any fucking idiot could look at a graph and tell you what it means. Simplest thing. 1 + 1 = 2. The graph goes up, the cases are up. What the fuck are you talking about? But anyway, these articles kind of angered me because why wouldn't you dig into the actual conspiracies that are behind all this? It's been going on since way before 9/11, at least the early 90s. So that's exactly what we're going to do here on the Tinkus Show today. This video is going to be long, probably. It's going to be very elaborate, and I will list all my sources so that you don't have to trust anything. I don't want you to believe anything I say at all. The complete opposite of what the mainstream media is doing. Believe nothing I say unless you can prove it yourself. I'm going to list all my sources, where I got the information from, how I drew my conclusions, and I'll try to be careful about when something's an opinion or more of a fact. So are you ready? Let's go down the rabbit hole. Now, I guess I should start off with giving you my background on conspiracy theory. I'm not new to this. This is not my first time seeing conspiracy theories ever. I mean, I've known about this stuff since at least 2004, and I was deep diving back then. It started... yeah, it was around 2004. It had to have been. The first iPhone wasn't even out yet. I didn't have a cell phone. I was still using dial-up internet. Bear in mind, I was behind the times, but I had cable television at the time. I was watching this infomercial by this guy named Kevin Trudeau. And his book that he was promoting is called Natural Cures They Don't Want You to Know About. They. Who is they? Was the question. It was just a completely set up interview with, you know, the pre-scripted dialogue is obvious, and this guy was later kicked off the airwaves by the FTC, and the FDA didn't like him because he was saying that these are cures, and you're not allowed to say something's a cure unless the FDA approves it by law. So this guy got in a bit of trouble, but before he even came to the realization of all that, and it did kind of come out later that this guy was a scam artist, and he very well might be. I'm not sure. Could have been just trying to sweep him under the rug. This somehow triggered something in me, and he must have said something about the moon landings. I'm not sure exactly, but I started Yahooing, because I wasn't Googling at that time, the idea that the moon landings were faked. One of the first articles that I stumbled across was an article called MAJESTYTWELVE. It was all one word, all caps, written by a man named William Cooper. And in this article, he went to explain so much stuff that it was mind-blowing, and it did change my life. I haven't been the same from that day forward. But he covered everything from UFOs to Freemasons, and this was before the Freemason fascination with movies like National Treasure and Da Vinci Code and all those National Geographic specials, History Channel specials covering Freemasonry. And he was probably the first conspiracy theorist to combine all these conspiracy theories into one big thing called the New World Order. William Cooper, Milton William Cooper by birth, he is definitely the most influential conspiracy theorist of all time. There can't be anyone that's even touched this guy. Now, some might say, I haven't even heard of this fucking guy. What about Alex Jones? I almost guarantee there would be no such thing as an Alex Jones without William Cooper. He was obviously following his script, as Cooper came out in 1991 with his radio broadcast The Hour of the Time and his book Behold a Pale Horse, also in 1991. Here, I got a copy right here. Look at this beefy son of a bitch. This thing is, the print is small. He's got all sorts of government documents in here. Book is insane, dude. It was so influential. For example, an artist with Wu-Tang Records called Kill Army, their first album ever was called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which was the title of William Cooper's first chapter in that book. The Wu-Tang Clan mentions, you know, I guarantee you a lot of this stuff with like Tupac and the Killuminati Machiavelli album, certain things Jay-Z says. There's so many rap artists and musicians in general, but mainly in the hip-hop rap community, that were influenced by this book. So why is this book so popular amongst hip-hop artists of the early 90s through early 2000s? Some fat white guy. The hell, who is this guy? People in these communities, ghettos, are notorious for drugs, and you know, there's been these ideas and theories and conspiracies involving the CIA, the ones being responsible for bringing the drugs into this country. Because just think about it. How many pounds of drugs every single day would it take to keep every crackhead and cokehead alone? This would take a massive operation. Or a shit ton of people. There's no way this could be coming to the southern border. At least this was Bill Cooper's conclusion, which lined up with the popular conclusion in these ghetto communities, which were largely, you know, where a lot of the drugs are being dealt in, you know, small amounts. And it's also worth noting that the South African Minister of Health in the year 2000, he was actually breaking down some of Bill Cooper's theories. Because, should I just read Cooper's theories on HIV and AIDS? Now, this was written by William Cooper, dated July 27th, 1990. 1990, folks, and he actually puts 9:02 p.m. in military time, though. This guy is so elaborate. I think partially why it's just so believable to believe everything this guy says. He is so detailed. Just listen to some of this. Okay, this is what Cooper wrote. Quote, "To all, during my talks in Las Vegas last week, I revealed a few things about AIDS that I have been keeping close to my chest. I have already revealed that I saw that AIDS was man-made to eliminate the undesirable elements of society, while I was attached to naval security and intelligence. I stated this fact in my paper, The Secret Government. Now for the rest of the story." Bill Cooper is on record being in the Navy, but he claimed to be part of the Naval Intelligence and the Naval Intelligence Briefing Team, which is where he received documents concerning UFOs. We'll talk about the UFO thing in a minute here. On with the article about HIV/AIDS. The first study was made in 1957 by scientists meeting in Huntsville, Alabama. This study resulted in Alternative 3. Another study was made by the Club of Rome. Have you heard of that one before? In 1968, to determine the limits to growth. The results of the study was that civilization as we know it would collapse shortly after the year 2000 unless the population was seriously curtailed. Several top-secret recommendations were made to the ruling elite by Dr. Aurelio Pesci of the Club of Rome. This chief recommendation was to develop a microbe that would attack the autoimmune system and thus render the development of a vaccine impossible. The orders were given to develop the microbe as to also develop a cure and a prophylactic. The microbe would be used against the general population and would be introduced by vaccine administered by the World Health Organization. The prophylactic was to be used by the ruling elite. The cure will be administered to the survivors when they decide that enough people have died. It will be announced as newly developed. This plan was called Global 2000. The cure and the prophylactic are suppressed. Funding was obtained from the U.S. Congress under HB 15090, where $10 million was given to the Department of Defense to produce a synthetic biological agent, an agent that does not naturally exist and for which no natural immunity could have been acquired. Within the next 5 to 10 years, it would probably be possible to make a new infective microorganism which could differ in certain important aspects from any known disease-causing organism. Most important of these is that it might be refractory to the immunology and therapeutic process upon which we depend to maintain our relative freedom from infectious disease. The project was carried out at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Since large populations were to be disseminated, the ruling elite decided to target the undesirable elements of society for extraction. Specifically targeted were the black, Hispanic, and homosexual populations. The name of the project that developed AIDS is MK Naomi, spelled in all caps. The African continent was infected via smallpox vaccine in 1977. The U.S. population was infected in 1978 with the hepatitis B vaccine through the Center for Disease Controls and the New York Blood Center. You now have the entire story. The order was given by the policy committee of the Bilderberg Group. The Bilderberg Group, like Alex Jones always talks about, he loves that group, doesn't he? Based in Switzerland, other measures were also ordered. He does go on and on and on and on in this, but I think you kind of get the point of Cooper's style of writing, and I encourage you to check this guy out. It's fascinating as hell. You also have to bear in mind that there really wasn't anybody before him. Yeah, there was people that obsessed about the JFK assassination, which, hey, should we talk about the theory that Cooper had about that? Cooper says in the, and this is probably one of the few things that I really find extremely hard to believe by him. He says that the driver killed John F. Kennedy, and it is revealed in the Zapruder film. Now, there are people saying that the Zapruder film is obviously doctored and sections are cut out. They could have cut out the muzzle flash. I'm not sure. I just find this one to be extremely difficult, especially since, I mean, this was on Mythbusters 2 when they shot a watermelon. Bam. It came back in the opposite direction. You know, instinctively you think you punch somebody in the face, they're going to go back. But when you shoot someone and the back of their skull blows out, sorry to be graphic, head might come back in the opposite direction. There has been a lot of debunking about this, and I frankly am not too concerned about who exactly killed JFK. What is more interesting is maybe if you want, I don't want to hog up this whole show just talking about every single one of Cooper's theories, so if you want to know about why he was killed to begin with, Cooper has a lot to say about that. He has a show called The Hour of the Time. This radio broadcast ran from 1991 to 2001. He had a 10-year run before he was killed by law enforcement, in which they lured him out of his house to charge him with tax evasion. Cooper would always say, never point your gun at someone unless they point it at you first. And they probably pointed their gun at him, and he might have shot first. I really don't know. Either way, he was obviously extremely paranoid towards the end there. He knew that they were coming for him. He had his life threatened to him multiple times, apparently, according to him. And the reason for him being an amputee, he only had one leg, is that he was riding his motorcycle and deliberately got ran off the road and his life was threatened. Told him to shut up, or you're going to be dead and your family's going to be dead. So he shipped his family off, apparently. He was living all by himself in his house with his guns. And a bunch of police officers, local law enforcement, dressed up like some teenage punks and caused a riot, so Cooper went down there, and he always carries a gun with him, and then he died. November 1st. Nope, November 5th, sorry. Remember November, the 5th of November. That's how I remember that one. The V for Vendetta. And that was a conspiratorial movie. So, one of the most interesting things about Cooper is probably the fact that he did actually predict on his show, radio show, Hour of the Time. All the internet archives are out there. I will link this in the description below. You can easily Google William Cooper predicts 9/11 and listen to it. It was 2 months before this happened. He said,
"Can you believe what you have been seeing on CNN today, ladies and gentlemen? Can you believe it?" Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals in their hideout. This is a CNN reporter with a camera crew. And he came out and told everybody, within 3 weeks, Osama bin Laden is going to attack the United States and Israel. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. The FBI also, under the leadership of Louis Freeh, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years and years and years and many years, and can't find him. Some doofus, jerk-off reporter with a camera crew waltzes right into his hideout and interviews him. And you know what his budget is? Zip, zilch, nothing. Now, that tells us two things. Either everyone in the intelligence community and all of the intelligence agencies of the United States government are blithering idiots and incompetent fools, including the entire apparatus of the FBI and all of their personnel, or they're lying to us. They're not looking for him at all. And the second is the truth. You see, the CIA created Osama bin Laden. They recruited him. They trained him. They found his leadership. They brought them all together. They showed them how to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and when that was over, they still continued to fund him and train him, and they're now using him to help bring about world government by making him the big boogeyman, because they can't use Saddam Hussein anymore, because they needed a new boogeyman. A reporter from CNN and his little camera crew got in to Osama bin Laden's secret hideout and conducted an interview. If you don't believe me, tune into CNN. They're probably running it right now as I'm speaking. And if you believe it, you are one of the stupidest jerks that ever lived on the face of this earth. And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it.
He said it will be blamed on Osama bin Laden, but it won't actually be him. And then after these attacks happened, I don't think I've even listened to any of these 9/11. As much as I've tucked into stuff, I've always been interested in like the mystery schools and stuff. But he has a bunch of 9/11 shows right after 9/11 happened, and I think it's a lot of call-in shows and stuff like that. And some of that's kind of interesting because that allows Cooper to kind of go on a tangent instead of reading from his script and reading from a book or something and doing his show that way. Either way, I think it is fairly safe to say that Bill Cooper is probably a humongous reason why so many people believe in conspiracy theories today, and they are growing and growing and growing now, especially with this coronavirus. Living in a very uncertain world right now, very skeptical world, and probably about half the population is pissed off as fuck and just wants to get back to normal. Another interesting thing about Bill Cooper is that he fucking hated Alex Jones. Was not a friend. He appeared on a show one time, and that was before he made a name for himself. I'm talking about Jones, of course. Alex Jones kept trying to invite him on the show, according to Cooper, and he refused. Couldn't stand this guy. Cooper had a series of 3 videos in a row breaking down Alex Jones's YK hysteria. It's a 3-hour-long typical show that Alex Jones does, but he was saying everything from power plants are shutting down across the world, and he just kept amping this up and amping it up. And then oh, news just came in. Russia's gonna nuke the United States. He actually said this stuff. Bill Cooper was so fucking pissed. He was 100% convinced himself, even though he admitted that he had 0 proof of it, that Alex Jones was put here to discredit conspiracy theory. Because Jones did use all the foundation of what Cooper built, but then just played like a day-by-day, every little thing's a conspiracy theory type of show. And he still does this to this day. Cooper also had, it was one of his last shows. It had to have been like within his last 2-3 weeks. He had a show called Alex Jones Liar, which was mainly just a call-in show. But Cooper said,
apparently the other night, or within the last week, because I've been getting a lot of email about this, and I even received one telephone call. Apparently somebody called the Alex Jones broadcast and asked him why he didn't have me on the air, or asked him something about me. Alex Jones said he had me on the air once before, several years ago, and had to cut me off the air because of the foul language that I used. So on the air tonight, I'm going to tell you, Alex Jones, you are a bold-faced, miserable, stinking little coward liar. Now let me say that again so there's no mistake about it. You can all tell Alex Jones that I said this, and I suspect he's listening because he does. Alex Jones, you are a bold-faced, stinking, rotten little coward liar. I was only on the Alex Jones show one time. It was years ago, when I didn't know who he was, when I didn't realize what a liar and a coward and a sensationalist bullshit artist that he is. He was on one little FM station down in Texas. He wasn't on all the stuff that he's on now. And I agreed to be on his broadcast. That's when I was doing guest appearances on broadcasts, years ago. I was not cut off. I did not use any kind of foul language whatsoever. He treated me very well, and I stayed on for the whole show. Some of you in Texas know that that's true because you heard the broadcast and you taped it. Later, when I found out who Alex Jones was and what he was doing to the truth, and what a cowardly liar and sensationalist he really is, every time he called me after that, I have always refused to appear on his broadcast. Absolutely refused to lend him any credibility whatsoever by appearing on his broadcast. And that made him very angry. I've also revealed him for the lying sensationalist bullshit artist that he is by every once in a while bringing to your attention the lies and the deceit and the rumors that he spreads over the airwaves that are not good for any of us, and they're not good for the nation. They are especially not good for militia and patriots. The most disgusting broadcast he ever did was on New Year's Eve, the year 2000, the New Year's Eve 1999, bringing in the year 2000, which he went completely out of his mind and claimed that Russia had launched intercontinental ballistic missiles with multiple warheads at the United States of America, and actually panicked millions of people who were putting their children and their belongings in their cars and heading for the hills. Now, there's lots of things that can be said about me. Nobody needs to lie about me. Sometimes I am irritating. Sometimes I absolutely will not suffer fools and am just as rude as I can be. Nobody has to lie about me, Alex Jones. So I suggest that the next time somebody calls your broadcast and asks them about me, you tell the truth. There's lots of truth that you can tell about me. But don't ever lie on me, buddy, because I'll chop you off at your ankles. I will chew you up. I will spit you out for the lying, stinking, rotten little coward that you are. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say about Mr. Sensationalist, lying, rumor-mongering, bullshit artist, Alex Jones.
I suppose it is worth pointing out that Alex Jones is one of the people, according to himself, put up over $100,000 to fund the recent peaceful protest for the Stop the Steal in front of the Capitol. Now, I'm not blaming Jones for what happened, rushing the Capitol, but when your radio show is based on fear-mongering and getting people riled up, this is the end of democracy. We need to fight for freedom. Yeah. Getting people all crazy for months beforehand. Over a month. I don't know what he expected to have happen. If the media spends the last 4 years bashing Trump relentlessly, wow. What are they going to do with this?
The future does not belong to globalists. The future belongs to patriots.
Alex Jones is also known for promoting conspiracy theories and then walking them back. Because this is what he does. Find something that's interesting, right? Like, for example, Michelle Obama is a man. Alright? What's your proof? Oh, she's got extra wide shoulders and she's got man hands. That's it? Oh no, we got Joan Rivers on tape.
You know Michelle is a trans...
I'm sorry, she's a what?
A transgender. We all...
The best thing that Alex Jones has probably done, breaking into the Bohemian Grove. That shit was fucking awesome. Now, David Icke is another one of the big name conspiracy theorists out there. He is the man who is famous for saying lizard people. I don't know if he still believes this shit, but that was one of his claims to fame, I believe. It is kind of interesting. Obviously, all these conspiracy theorists have the same foundation of the New World Order, the globalists, the Chi-Com takeover of the world, the elimination of the Second Amendment in America here. Freedom of speech is gone, of course. You're not going to have that. You're not going to have no rights to private property. All this passed under the veil of multiple things, including climate change, which is false. And Bill Cooper was with this theory way back in the 90s. It is kind of interesting, though, that the major thing I learned in high school about this, we learned about overpopulation and we learned about climate change. But the thing about climate change is that we learned is that the evidence of it is clear because there's holes in the ozone.
The sky is falling, the sky is falling, the ozone is being depleted. Oh my God, we must seek help. The biggest source of ozone in the atmosphere is from ultraviolet light. Ozone doesn't protect us from ultraviolet light. Ozone is formed from ultraviolet light. Do you understand what I'm saying? Ultraviolet light cannot come through the atmosphere without striking molecules of oxygen, and when it does, it forms ozone, and the ultraviolet light is depleted by this chemical reaction. You understand? Ozone is not protecting us from ultraviolet light. No. Oxygen protects us from ultraviolet light by depleting the ultraviolet light when the ultraviolet light strikes the molecule of oxygen and turns it into ozone.
I think I covered my bases for a lot of the conspiracy theorists. I mean, you got some, I don't even know if Jordan Maxwell's around anymore, but he was big on, like, language and, like, why they called students pupils because of the eye, and the apple signify the teacher because of the forbidden fruit in the garden and shit like that. I mean, he just kind of went off on that type of stuff. And there's this Christian pastor. A lot of these conspiracy theorists are Christians, and this guy named Tex Mars, he made a book called Codex Majestia, where majority of this massive, huge book was just pictures of celebrities doing like hand signs. I'm like, what am I even learning here? Nothing. Thank you. Next. So I think we should get on to something a little more interesting. Secret societies seem to be the #1 most interesting thing about this whole New World Order charade, right? It's the most proof that you're gonna have that anything weird is going on. This Illuminati thing was a real deal, and this Adam Weishaupt guy apparently started this, and he decided that he wanted to create this secret society, but then he found a way to infiltrate it within the Freemasons, into the higher ranks. Their major goal was to overthrow the government. They were against superstition and religious influence. Being in the Masonic Lodge, successfully being able to do that, even though it was outlawed and said to no longer exist. How can you prove that something doesn't exist when you have a secret order that is keeping all this stuff secret? And the reason I say that is just to prove that this was an actual order. It was a concept. It was an idea created by a man. And basically, the term Illuminati is just kind of interchangeable with any sort of secret society conspiracy that there is. It's just a generalized term nowadays. The most familiar secret society, one of the more interesting ones, would have to be Freemasonry. While they claim to not be a secret society, but a society with secrets, their membership rosters are public record. I guess that's the only reason they can say that. Went to my local library quite some time ago, probably sometime around 2007, I'm guessing. The one thing on the shelf that they had, as far as Freemasons go, it listed, it was an old one too, and it listed the major corporation, which is now global, humongous billion-dollar meatpacking plant in this small town, started by a Freemason, son was a Freemason, his son was a Freemason, I believe, as well, but also local, nearby, a little bit bigger city. Their major business is this world-renowned clinic, also started by two brothers that are both Freemasons. What are the fucking chances of that just within my local vicinity? I don't know, man. And then I went down to the local cemetery, and there's this gigantic obelisk with the dude's name on it. I don't really want to get into it all, but that's the Masonic Cemetery. The local park was named after one of the guys with Masonic. There's something to this, is what I'm trying to say. Like I said before, there's a pretty big fascination going on about Freemasonry. So you had like the History Channel releasing documentaries about Freemasonry. You had different movies in Hollywood coming out. Then you had this movie called The Secret from 2006. And this was very, very, very new agey. But it was the same exact concept, that there's this ancient secret that was now discovered. But I'm telling you right now that this was a very, very, very misguided film that completely missed all the... Freemasons would totally shun this. I wouldn't doubt if it was true, but it would involve a hell of a lot more than that. I mean, this isn't even like the tip of the iceberg at all. But these types of things kind of got my mind working in that way, so I was extremely curious. So I dug deeper and deeper and deeper and read their own works. Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book. That fucking thing is huge. I got it on my bookshelf over there. Nice, nice. Also, Manly P. Hall did one, Lost Keys of Freemasonry. I also have that one. And Albert Pike, you know him? You recognize that name? He is thought to be like one of the founding members of the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK. He did a book called Morals and Dogma. He was Albert Pike was the head of the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite, Freemasonry in the United States. If you're interested in anything involving these secret societies, a good place to start would probably be maybe Bill Cooper's on the Hour of the Time, HOTT.com, I believe it is. Mystery Babylon is what he called it, the Mystery Babylon series. It was William Cooper's most famous broadcast series, and this was magnificent. He started off breaking down 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick.
For that movie was a message to those initiates who were well versed in the symbology and the mystery religion of an ancient religion that is practiced to this day in secret. Now I'm going to tell you the meaning of the symbology that you saw in the movie 2001, for it is the story of the entire human race according to the history of the mystery religion of ancient Babylon. In the beginning of the movie 2001, as they saw first a dark and gray and ugly world, and as that world began to move down from the center of the screen, they saw behind it a moon. And as the moon began to come down with the world that was sinking to the lower part of the screen, behind it you saw the emergence of the sun. What you were witnessing was an eclipse of the sun, partial eclipse. And as the light from the sun spilled across the edge of the moon, it took the shape of the boat of Isis. And the sun, of course, for anyone who has studied the Osirian cycle, became Osiris. And the symbology was Osiris riding across the heavens upon the boat of Isis. This signified, of course, the creation of the universe and of the world. And what we saw next was a barren plain, and then we saw the sun begin to rise in the east over the horizon, signifying the birth of the world. Then as the sun began to reach its zenith, small green plants began to emerge. Now the sun traveling across the heavens did not, of course, signify a day. It signified an age. As the sun sank deeper, we saw the emergence of animal life. And then we could see primitive man in the form of an ape mingling amongst the animals, neither harming the other, living in a state of innocence. And you saw man only eating plants. The significance of this was the age of innocence, when man lived in the Garden of Eden. Now as the sun begins to sink even farther in the west, man and his little tribe goes to the water hole and confronts another group of primitive man. And there's a confrontation, but you notice that no one was injured or killed. And then they scurried into the womb, signified by the cave. And you were seeing man in the transformation from ape to human. And then what happened in the movie? Toward the dawn, you heard the humming of bees. And the beehive and bees are a prominent symbol in the mystery schools. It signifies societal cohesion. And as the sun again began to rise up in the east, signifying the dawn of the new man, the audience beheld an obelisk, a monolith. And it appeared that the humming of the bees was emanating from this block of stone. You watched as the apes milled about in great excitement until he actually reached out and touched the face of the stone, and he was imparted intellect. Now most people that I knew attributed what happened to some extraterrestrial force, and they were receiving the exoteric interpretation, and that through the gift of intellect, man himself will become God. As it progressed, you saw the first primitive man form the first original thought with the use of the gift of intellect when he squatted in the dust and picked up a bone, flopped the bone over, and saw it hit a rib, and the rib flew up into the air. And he looked at it, and he flopped it over to the other side and hit another piece of rib bone, and it flew up into the air. See the wheels turning in the mind of this primitive individual. Then he crushed the skull of the dead animal, and you notice that the portrayal of this was absolutely accurate, because the next thing that happened was that this new gift, this intellect, and this original thought led to the murder of another primitive human being. In this case, of the tribe that had not been given the gift of intellect, did not have the ability to use a bone as a weapon because they had not made the connection. And the progression of the use of the gift of intellect led you to a space station spinning around the earth.
If this is not the book of Genesis, verbatim, well, with differences obviously, but that's the way all these stories are. You have these ancient mythologies that are the same all across the world, including Christianity and all this. For the most part, a lot of them are very, very, very similar. And you think, well, what's the significance of that? Well, that just proves that religion is bullshit, right? No. It proves that there's a common theme. For example, if you look at the ancient Egyptian mythologies and the Osirian cycle,
the fable of Isis and Osiris is a great drama, which is termed the Passion Play of Egypt. This fable is Egyptian, and since the Egyptians transcended in wisdom, perhaps this fable obscurely signifies something more than a fable. This account of Isis and Osiris are from fragments of Egyptian religious literature. The story, then, is in substance as follows. The goddess Nut was the daughter of Shu and Tefnut. Nut brought forth 5 children in 5 days in 5 different locations. On the first day she brought forth Osiris, and the place of his birth was Mount Nisa in Arabia the Happy. This Mount Nisa in Arabia could possibly be the true Mount Sinai, also known as Jebel al-Lawz, located in modern-day Saudi Arabia. Later, Osiris became the king of Egypt and would transform the country from its barbarous existence into a happy and communal society. Osiris taught men agriculture and encoded a rule of law. He taught them to show reverence towards the gods and how to worship them. After bringing knowledge and enlightenment to Egypt, Osiris traveled throughout the rest of the world. He converted people to his disciplines, not by force, but by the persuasion of reason. Osiris was also accompanied on his journey by a procession of nymphs and other supernatural entities who filled the air with music and song. In the meantime, Typhon, or Set, the brother of Osiris, had ambition to usurp the throne, but the vigilant Isis, the wife of Osiris, was too watchful. Typhon, however, persuaded 72 other persons to join him in his conspiracy, and perfected a plot against Osiris. Typhon fashioned a chest to the exact measurements of the body of Osiris. He then brought the chest into a banquet hall, where all the princes of Egypt were feasting, in celebration of the return of their king. Typhon presented the chest, and promised that the elaborately ornamented box would go to the one whose body upon trial most neatly fitted it. Now each of the princes in turn lay down in the box, but each was either too short or too tall, until last of all Osiris himself lay down in it. Immediately the 72 conspirators rushed to the box, clamped the lid on it and fastened it with nails, and pulled molten lead over all the cracks and crevices. After this they carried the chest to the banks of the Nile and cast it into the river, where it meets the sea. Once Isis hears of what happened to her husband, she mourns for Osiris by cutting off a lock of her hair, and putting on the mourning apparel of widowhood. The place in which she did this was later named Koptos, the city of mourning. The chest of Osiris was carried by the sea to the coast of Byblos in Phoenicia, which is modern-day Lebanon. The chest became lodged in a bush of tamarisk, which miraculously grew up around the sacred receptacle and concealed it within its trunk. The king of Byblos, amazed at this miracle, ordered the tree to be cut down, and from the trunk containing the box of Osiris, he made a pillar to support the roof of his palace. By magic, Isis discovers this and travels to Byblos, where she attached herself to the queen as a nurse to her children. At night, when all the palace was asleep, Isis transformed herself into a swallow and fluttered around the column. In due time, Isis revealed her divine nature and asked that the pillar be cut down. Taking the chest, Isis departed with it to a deserted place, where she performed certain magical rites by which the body of Osiris was temporarily animated, giving Isis enough time to sleep with her husband and impregnating her with a son, who would be named Horus, the child that was conceived from the dead. Isis then left the body of Osiris in order to give birth to Horus without the knowledge of Typhon, who would have destroyed the child. Isis hid the chest in a remote place, but one night Typhon, while hunting by the light of the moon, chanced upon it. Knowing Isis to be proficient in magic, Typhon tore the body of Osiris into 14 pieces and scattered them all over Egypt. At this time, Thoth, the prince of law, came to the assistance of Isis. Thoth also prophesied that Horus would sit upon the throne of his father and rule the double empire of Egypt. Upon the advice of Thoth, Isis hides the child in a papyrus swamp. Leaving her son, Isis constructs a magical boat from papyrus and travels across Egypt looking for the scattered pieces of her husband. As she gathered the parts, she encased them in a magical mummy composed of wax, incense, and grain seed. She finally recovered all the parts of Osiris except for the phallus, which had been thrown into the river and devoured by 3 fishes. This organ Isis reproduced in gold, and having performed all the ceremonies necessary to ensure the life of Osiris in the underworld, she returned to her son Horus. Now we turn from this fable and interpret the meaning behind the allegory. Osiris represents the sun, and Isis the moon. Osiris is the doctrine of the mysteries, and Isis is the church. The 14 parts of Osiris are scattered through the 7 divine and 7 infernal spheres. Some of these scattered parts of esoteric wisdom are found among the Sufis of Islam, who explored the depths of nature. In Judaism, the rabbis intricately unraveled the skein of the Kabbalah. In India, they contemplated the triple-headed Brahma, and the Rosicrucians attempted to recast the molten sea that stood before the temple in Jerusalem. All of these different disciplines together are Isis searching for the members of her Lord. Isis, by modeling and reproducing the missing member of Osiris, gives the body of the god the appearance of completeness, but the life power is not there. However, the golden phallus is rendered alive by the secret rituals found in the Lost Book of Thoth. Thus, the divine power of Osiris is restored through the process of initiation.
I hope you understood what that meant. The phallus being lost, replaced with a golden replica representing the lost mysteries. I don't know how much of a background you guys have on this stuff. I'm assuming none. Also, in Dealey Plaza, you will find an obelisk. In Washington, D.C., you will find an obelisk, also known as the Washington Monument. In the courtyard of the Vatican, you will find an obelisk, also known as St. Peter's Square, which is a circular temple of the sun. Should I continue? Alright. The family in England, whose estates are known as Scion House, has an obelisk in the lawn. There is also an obelisk in the Israel Supreme Court. Now let's look at a very curious event, and it does center around Yale. Particularly the Skull and Bones Society. Now these secret fraternal orders I typically don't pay any mind to, because I don't think there's much to be gained there. But Yale alone has 3 of them. Skull and Bones, Wolf's Head, and Scroll and Key, I believe. I think I got those right. But the Skull and Bones, there's only 15 people every year to be initiated into that secret fraternity. And when George Bush Jr. was running against John Kerry, I don't remember the actual year. I'm so sick of researching shit. Look up the year. I don't give a fuck. George Bush versus John Kerry. They were both Skull and Bones members. Well, I guess that was just coincidence, wasn't it? We had to pick from a Skull and Bones Secret Society member versus a Skull and Bones Secret Society member. I don't know. I don't know, folks. This is getting kind of dirty now. I think we're getting into the real shit. So what do you think when you see the Statue of Liberty? What do you think that might be? Not very many people know this, perhaps, but something they failed to teach in schools. This is called the Statue of Liberty, right? Wrong. It's called Liberty Enlightening the World. And it has ties to Freemasonry, to say the least. This Colossus in New York Harbor was conceived, financed, built, and installed by Freemasons. Fact. The Scottish Rite Northern Jurisdiction website right here. There is indeed a time capsule below this cornerstone. Includes a copy of the United States Constitution, George Washington's farewell address, 20 bronze medals of presidents up through Chester Arthur, including Washington, Monroe, Jackson, Polk, Buchanan, Johnson, and Garfield, who were all Freemasons. Interesting. This is coming from their own official website. But if you'll notice, you can obviously see that she's holding a torch, which symbolizes intellect. The crown on her head most likely represents the sun, but the tablet that she's holding is not a tablet whatsoever. It is a
keystone. Also plays a major part in the ceremony of the Royal Arch, but from an entirely different perspective. Those of you with a knowledge of history will know that the Temple of King Solomon in Jerusalem, which we learn about in the 3 craft degrees, stood for about 400 years until it was destroyed by the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar. The Royal Arch ceremony is set in the time frame when the ruins of the former temple are being cleared, when the roof of the vault, incorporating a keystone, was found. This discovery proves to be enormously important and leads to certain items that are lost in the craft being recovered. So yes, the keystone is the connection between the marked degree and the Royal Arch, and hence the name of our presentation this evening.
very symbolic piece as well. the fact that a lot of people still think it's just merely a tablet. The Statue of Liberty obviously bears an eerily similar resemblance to Isis. Isis is obviously the Egyptian goddess. And if you want to know, the deepest of my findings say that she is the mysteries herself. Represents. Isis is referred to as the Virgin Mother of the World and the Queen of Heaven. Where have we heard that before? Maybe the Catholic Church, where they also have an Egyptian obelisk. Why does all this relate back to Egypt? This is so fucking weird. Don't you have to admit that at least a little bit? So I suppose I should kind of break down some of the secret orders. I don't know.
Freemason Manly P. Hall states that when Atlantis died, so did the ideal pattern of government. According to Hall, the League of 10 Kings is part of the secret doctrine preserved by secret societies through their oral traditions. Hall believes that when the unifying force of the 10 Kings was broken, destruction automatically followed. So complete was this destruction, he writes, that men forgot there is a better way of life and accepted the evils of war and crime and poverty as inevitable. The old Atlantis is gone, dissolved in a sea of human doubts, but the philosophical empire would come again as a democracy of wise men. This connects directly with the protocols of the wise men of Sion.
If you want to know about the Knight Templar and Freemason connection, you're probably going to want to read a book called The Lost Secrets of Freemasonry by John J. Robinson. I have that book myself. It's very interesting. A lot of these books are very dry reading because they're nonfiction, but I mean it's just non-stop information if you want it. There's also an article called Arcanorum. It means the mystery of all mysteries, and it involves astrology, alchemy, and magic. I mean, this shit gets really, really fucking deep into like the creepy zone, man. For my conclusion, I've kind of drew that like the way most people kind of get initiated into these extra secret societies, because those are actual secret societies. You can't just walk into a door that says Arcanorum. Not gonna happen. But you can walk into a Masonic lodge maybe, or confront one of the Masons and ask to be a member and get rejected or whatever happens. But they're gonna weed you out pretty quick. Your progress in the ranks is gonna stop like immediately, unless you're really hungry for knowledge and showing progress and that you're capable. They're well aware that most people are not capable, so most people pretty much stop at the 3rd degree, or maybe a little bit beyond, or maybe they're told that they're progressing or something like that. That's kind of, I think a lot of these people are misled. I mean, Albert Pike does. I mean, I read this book very elaborately and studied it for quite a while, over a year, just kind of dabbling in it. And the people in the Blue Lodge is what the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry is called. They're intentionally kind of left to just kind of mislead themselves into believing in wrong things, and that way they're not led into the higher ranks. They're not, you know, if your grandfather is in the Freemasons, it doesn't mean he knows a goddamn thing. He thinks he knows something because he's got a little shard of something that other people might not know, but that's about it. Now, one of the major questions about Freemasonry is, what does that goddamn fucking G stand for? They say, oh, it stands for God. Oh, no, it stands for geometry. What does it actually stand for? Well, William Cooper said he dug as far as he could, and his main conclusion that it stands for gnosis, which makes the most sense, because gnosis means knowledge. And that's the symbolism of the flame, symbolism of the sun, and this is probably the best explanation. Now, what do these people actually believe? It's pantheism, or panentheism. That's the idea that everything is God. Everything in the world collectively is God. That means a rock, a grain of sand, me, you, a dog, a fish, everything collectively is, in its totality, is God. And with this belief, us humans, being the most consciously aware beings, have the highest potential to become gods. But what's getting in our way? Why are we not gods yet? Well, that brings us to something I discovered completely outside anything related to William Cooper whatsoever. It's something called the 100th monkey theory.
What if someone in your family or someone you knew learned to fly a plane, and then all of a sudden you just understood how to fly a plane without ever having a lesson or being in an airplane? Our gut reaction to this is to say that's impossible. But is there any evidence that something like this is indeed possible? Is there something like the wireless internet that connects our minds? There are several theories and research papers that attempt to explore this idea. One of these theories is called the 100th monkey syndrome, and it actually has quite a bit of evidence documented to support such a claim. In 1952, Japanese scientists were observing a tribe of monkeys on the island of Koshima. The species is known as the macaque fuscata, also known as the snow monkey. They were providing the monkeys with sweet potatoes, which they just put on the ground. As the scientists were observing the monkeys, they noticed that one monkey had learned to wash the sand off of the potato before eating it. These scientists continued to observe the monkeys for 6 years. Over this time, more and more monkeys were learning to wash the potatoes before eating them. By 1958, a decent amount of monkeys had learned to wash their potatoes. But what happened next caught the scientists by surprise. What they estimated to be the 100th monkey had learned to wash his potato. Then, within the next 24 hours, the entire tribe of monkeys were washing their potatoes before eating them. It was as if the 100th monkey tipped the scales of conscious understanding, and suddenly the whole tribe understood how to wash their potatoes. After taking 4 years for nearly 100 monkeys to learn this task, it only took one night for the rest of the population to pick up this behavior. What surprised the scientists even more is that the other tribes of monkeys were suddenly washing their potatoes too. Even the tribes that had never washed their food and were separated by the ocean on different islands and in some cases on the mainland, they too were washing their potatoes. This led the scientists to theorize that there was some sort of conscious connection that the monkeys were sharing.
Also known as the 100th monkey effect. It is a spontaneous transference of knowledge throughout a species. Once a certain number of individuals have learned a new idea or action, it bypasses physical barriers. A mind-to-mind jump. A leap in consciousness. It sounds a lot like Buddhism, I know, because, yeah, it is. Like Buddhism in the New Age, and it's just kind of like a different outer shell of it. I know it sounds kind of out there, so I don't know. I think I'm just gonna leave it there. If you guys wanna do more research on that, it's totally up to you. Okay, I know I mentioned that time capsule, the Statue of Liberty. There's also a time capsule or a series of time capsules apparently in some huge hollowed out hole behind Mount Rushmore. Also a time capsule in Georgia underneath the Georgia Guidestones. I don't know if you've heard of this monument. This is one of the most bizarre things possibly in our country.
In Georgia, there is a strange monument that has been erected called the Georgia Guidestones. Mysterious monument with a vital message, they say, for humanity. And all of this that I am delivering to you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, comes directly from the Rosicrucian Digest, the official magazine of the Worldwide Rosicrucian Order. Now, I have been to Georgia. I have seen the Guidestones. You see, when I saw them years ago, I had no idea. I had no idea that I was looking at something significant for the future of the human race. This article in the Rosicrucian Digest was written by Carl F. Hollenbach, Fraternitas Rosicruciae. On a hill in rural Georgia stand 5 large upright granite blocks aligned like Stonehenge with the sun and the moon. Reaching over 19 feet in height, a center slab and 4 corner slabs support a capstone weighing 12 tons. 4-inch high letters sandblasted on each side of the 4 corner slabs spell out the same message in 8 languages: English, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, Arabic, Hebrew, Swahili, and Hindi. The message on these Georgia Guidestones espouses the conservation of humanity and future generations. The guides are as follows, and this is exactly what it says on the stones. And I quote, "Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Unite humanity with a living new language. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Balance personal rights with social duties. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature," end quote. Well, folks, I did not repeat that. That's exactly the way it is on the Guidestone. Around the sides of the capstone, a different message is written in 4 dead languages: Classical Greek, Sanskrit, Babylonian, cuneiform, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. The messages beseech, quote, "Let these be a guidestone to an age of reason," end quote. The mystery that shrouds the Guidestones began in June 1979 when a well-dressed and articulate man walked into the office of Joe H. Findley, Sr., president of Elberton Granite Finishing Company. He wanted to know the cost of building a large monument to the conservation of humanity. He identified himself as Mr. Christian and told Findley that he represented a small group of Americans who wished to remain anonymous forever. He said he wanted a monument which he called a guidestone for the conservation of the world and to herald the coming age of reason. Now I will repeat this: to herald the coming age of reason. 8 miles north of Elberton, on the highest point in Elbert County, which rests upon the Elberton Granite Deposit, a huge mass of granite roughly 35 miles long, 6 miles wide, and most probably 2 to 3 miles deep. Martin promised that when the project was completed, he would deliver his file on the affair to the anonymous sponsors and that the secret would never be known. And in March 1980, the project was finished. The stones are placed so that certain holes and slits do align astronomically with the north celestial pole, the noonday sun, the rising and setting points of the sun and moon on the horizon. A slit at eye level in the central upright slab permits an observer to view the eastern and western horizons, where the sun and moon rise and set. A 2-inch diameter hole through the center stone from south to north is inclined at an angle of 34 degrees and points to the celestial North Pole. The North Star can be seen through this hole at night. A beam of sunlight passing through a hole in the capstone forms a spot of light below. The position of the spot can be used to determine high noon and today's date on any day. A granite slab near the Guidestones states that a time capsule was placed 6 feet below on blank to be opened on blank, adding to the mystery as both dates are missing. The pseudonym R.C. Christian suggests a reference to the Fama Fraternitas, to the will and meaning of Father Christian Rosenkreuz, or to Christian Rosenkreuz. The mystery, however, of who is behind the building of the Georgia Guidestones is intended to be a secret forever. Good luck, we know that it was the Fraternitas Rosicruciae who erected this thing. And it was not an accident, ladies and gentlemen, that it was that it was built, ladies and gentlemen, on the farm of Wayne Mullenix, who was also a member of the Fraternitas Rosicruciae.
I think my mind is spinning enough. Done with these secret society shit, man. I can't handle anymore. Population control. How many people can this world sustain? Now, while in these developed nations, Bill Gates and many others admit that the population growth is decreasing. But by decreasing, it doesn't mean it's a net zero. By no means. Just view it from a common sense perspective for a second.
Why is it that they won't let us have these things that we know will cure disease? Why are they so hard on homeopathic medicine? Why this, why that, why this, why that? It's simple, folks. Once you really get into it, there is no doubt about it, there is a serious population problem. At the end of World War II, well, actually during the war, they did a study to try to determine the effect of the returning soldiers from the war upon the economy. What these people who made the study projected was that there was going to be a whole bunch of babies born. They did a study again in 1957, which stated that the exponential increase of the population would ensure that the population would double between 1957 and 1990, and it did. They said that if something wasn't done, the increase in the use of insecticides, toxic chemical waste, effluent sewage, the pollution of the air, the use of fossil fuels, the use of timber, the increased need for raw materials was going to put us in a crisis, because they said that if something wasn't done to stop the growth of the population would double again 28 years from 1990, and it will. And then we will need twice as many trees, twice as many homes, twice as many cars, twice as much oil, twice as much food, twice as much everything. We will be putting twice as much sewage into the earth, twice as much pollution into the atmosphere, twice as much toxic waste material. And the study said if we don't stop this, if something isn't done, the human race will cause itself to become extinct shortly by or after the year 2000. Some people still didn't believe it. So the Club of Rome was formed secretly by Dr. Aurelio Pacheco in Rome, Italy. He got together a group of elite men and scientists, and they did another study and came up with exactly the same answers. They then commissioned a group of people in the United States at MIT. They put together a team to establish a computer model to determine what can be done to stop this, what can be done to ensure that it doesn't happen again, what can be done to ensure that the human race survives. And the answer is some of the things that I'm going to show you. All of this is in my book. It's thoroughly documented. It's going to really upset some of you, but it's true.
It's not just the amount of people, it's the quality of life. If you view the propaganda stuff going on, I mean, why do you think at the forefront of the women's liberation movement, the women's rights movement, is abortion rights? War is a big one. AIDS was a big one, because AIDS not only kills people, but it gets you to wrap your dick up so you're not impregnating a bunch of people because you're scared of getting a virus. Now if we look back to the Georgia Guidestones of the 500 million, maintained population under 500 million, climate change scare has a lot to do with this as well. And we could also probably get into the stuff about, what was that damn thing called with Klaus Schwab? The World Economic Forum. Yeah, you're gonna probably want to dig into that. They have a YouTube page that goes back for years and years. They deleted that one that went viral. It was blatant communism they were promoting. They said, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Well, they deleted that video, and I was questionable about if that was actually a video, that was the real video or not. But they left the one on there that was in Chinese language. So I typed this shit in, and yeah, sure enough, the Chinese lines up with the English, and it was the actual video. Of course, they're not gonna give a fuck if Chinese people listen to it because they're already communist. It's promoting a communist society. You will own nothing and have nothing. It's blatant communism. No wonder why people are looking to this great reset from the World Economic Forum as the new world order. It's what they're actually saying. They're like, oh, people are going to use this coronavirus to bring about a new world order. Yeah, what a conspiracy theorist. No, that's actually exactly what the Great Reset says. Literally. I mean, we're going to use this event to create these events. I don't know, man. lot of people believe in aliens. You know, you even had that Orson Welles' War of the Worlds where people just went into fucking hysteria. Fucking aliens invading! Presented it as an actual news broadcast in like a news broadcast format, so people believed it. The idea of that, Bill Cooper thought, was to test the population to see if they're capable of believing that we could be visited by aliens.
What do you think about aliens?
I don't think there are any. At one time, I thought that there were, simply based upon documents that I'd seen while I was attached to the intelligence briefing team of the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. At that time, and even for many years afterwards, I did not believe that the government would use me in that way. I had devoted my whole life to government service. I had been in the Air Force, I was in the Navy, I was a river patrol boat captain in Vietnam, I had proved myself, I had combat ribbons with the V for Valor. There was no doubt of my loyalty to my country. And maybe that's why it was so easy to use me, because I wouldn't doubt that what I saw was real. But over the years, I've done a lot of research. And what I've discovered is there's no proof existing anywhere that extraterrestrials are real, or that have ever visited this planet, or that they exist anywhere in the universe. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere. There is lots of evidence, tons of it in fact, that there are a group of people collectively known as the Illuminati who want us to believe in some extraterrestrial threat from space so that they can cause a world government, you know, bringing together of all the people to resist that external threat. The first time that I saw any reference to that, I was reading some papers from the Carnegie Endowment Fund, and there was a record of a speech. Well, it was a dinner for Viscount Ishii of the Japanese delegation, the Japanese Imperial delegation, in 1917. And John Dewey was one of the speakers. And the first sentence out of his mouth, as I was reading this, I almost fell out of my chair, because this was in 1917, and he said the best way to cause all the people of the world to come together in one world government and end war forever would be if we were attacked by some other species from some other planet. And boy, that just clicked with me, and I knew that that this is just another scam. This is the age of deception. There's no doubt about it. And then 8 times during Reagan's administration, he inserted almost the exact same phrase into 8 of his speeches. And it's a scam. That's what I can tell you. What they call UFOs, these craft that fly around the sky, are real. But they're not piloted by some little green guy from some other planet. They're owned and operated by the United States of America for one, the Soviet Union for another, probably Great Britain, Canada. I think the first really operable ones were probably manufactured in Western Canada, in the wilderness, in a place especially built to create those machines, like we created the Manhattan Project, and the same kind of secrecy surrounded it.
And now there is becoming quite a bit of talk about aliens. Like, why all of a sudden now? Nobody's seen them. The NASA, or was it no, it's the Navy, I believe, released the footage of these bizarre spacecrafts moving at rapid speed. And then you had these monoliths, so-called monoliths in Utah and around the world. They're obviously man-made. So many movies, comic books, it just went on forever and ever about UFOs. Like, where did this shit come from? Why is this being promoted? You had the Roswell incident with E.B., which translated into the movie E.T. Guarantee you, most of you are going to believe if an alien lands, or if the government discloses that aliens are real, and that they are in Area 51, or wherever they are, you're going to believe it.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
And apparently there's going to be, coming soon, a giant disclosure by the government of Aliens, coming soon.
Psychological warfare has been waged against America for much of this century. This war for the mind of the public has been facilitated by the emergence of mass media and the transformation of American education by behavioral psychologists. In the book 1984, George Orwell warned that people were in danger of losing their human qualities and freedom of mind without being aware of it while it was happening because of psychological, emotional, and intellectual manipulation. Mind control. Mind control in America. The most effective way to protect yourself from subconscious manipulation is by being aware of how it works. What the conscious mind believes, the subconscious acts on. It works like programming a computer. Information is fed into a computer, and the computer acts on it. However, if the information fed into the computer is wrong, it still acts on it. If a person believes something that is not true, the memory banks of the subconscious mind do not correct the error, but act on it. The theory of cognitive dissonance holds that the mind automatically and involuntarily rejects information not in line with previously accepted thoughts and beliefs. Many of the things that people believe are never questioned, especially when the information has come from a reliable source. It becomes easy to lose sight of why people believe some of the things that they do.
Unser Führer, Adolf Hitler, sich.
People can be led to believe something that is not true when that information is carefully timed and presented by an accepted and respected authority. The purpose of propaganda is to direct public attention to certain facts.
The whole art consists in doing this so skillfully that everyone will be convinced that the fact is real,
wrote Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. To be effective, propaganda must constantly short-circuit all conscious thinking and operate on the individual subconsciously. The principles behind the big lie of propaganda are the same principles of mind control, hypnotic suggestion, mental programming, distraction, and repetition. Distraction focuses the attention of the conscious mind on one or more of the five senses in order to stop conscious thinking, thus producing a state of mind that is similar to daydreaming. Think of the times you have caught yourself staring blankly at the television screen, losing all sense of time and place. When you stop conscious thinking and your mind goes blank, this is the hypnotic state of mind. This altered state occurs naturally, but can also be induced by clever manipulation. Think of the times you have seen flashing words in TV commercials. The flashing words are a distraction for your eyes to lock onto in order to induce hypnosis. The purpose of this is to reduce any resistance to the message by stopping all thought and analysis. Watching television often produces an altered state of consciousness. Though not consciously perceived, the television screen, while appearing static, actually flickers. Any repeating light or sound pattern can lead you into an altered state. A hypnotist uses patterned speech by varying the pacing and inflection of his voice to induce this state of mind in his subject. It is in this state of mind where one is the most receptive to mental programming. Whether or not the information takes hold in the mind depends on two factors: trust in the source of the information and repetition of the message. Trust in the source of the information induces acceptance of the message as true even if it is not understood. Repetition of the message embeds it in the subconscious so that acceptance of its truth and accuracy becomes a conditioned response. Thus, this information will be accepted as true without thinking about it whenever it is presented again.
Anyway, thank you for watching. I know that some of this shit seemed kind of out there and nonsensical and crazy and retarded.
First thing I remember was asking Papa why, for there were many things I didn't know. Daddy always smiled and he took me by the hand, saying someday you'll understand. Well, I'm here to tell you now, each and every mother's son, you better learn it fast, you better learn it young, 'cause someday never comes. Well, time and tears went by, and I collected dust, for there were many things I didn't know. Daddy went away, I tried to be a man, and someday you'll understand. Well, I'm here to tell you now, each and every mother's son, better learn it fast, better learn it young, 'cause someday